thank you for tuning in to another episode of Murder Dictionary Podcast. My name is Brianna, and over there is Kelly.
Drooly McDrooly.
Super McDrooly Kelly.
So wet. No, really, the minute you hit record,
it just starts flowing. All the Kelly drools.
And now, a thought from Geico Motorcycle. It took 15 minutes to take a spirit animal quiz online.
Please be the cheetah. Please be the cheetah.
And learn your animal isn't the cheetah, but the far less appealing blobfish.
Oh, come on.
To add insult to injury, you could have used those 15 blobfish minutes to switch your motorcycle insurance to Geico. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on motorcycle insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get started, I wanted to remind you guys to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you haven't left an iTunes review or subscribed, please go ahead and do that as well. We'll read all the iTunes reviews at the end of the show. So if you left one, definitely stick around. We want to say thank you and shout you out. In the description for this episode, we will include timestamps for the points in the story where there's violence. If you want to skip over that, just check the notes and we'll put those in there so you can skip over those parts of the story.
The too real markers. They're just the marking where it just gets too real.
Too real.
Too real.
This is when shit got real. We'll also include links to resources for domestic violence, suicide hotlines, mental health awareness, Child Protective Service. Yeah, I put those in there recently. So if you need any of those links, if you want those resources, if you want more information, definitely check out the show notes and we'll put those in there. We have a few new Patreon supporters this week, so we wanted to say thank you to Leah, Amanda, and Lee, who supported us on Patreon. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you. The link for that is going to be in the show notes as well. And I think that's it. We can get started.
Cool.
God,
thanks for those Patreon, though. Really, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's so sweet. Thanks, you guys.
Every time.
Little Kelly tears.
Yay.
We're going to bottle those up and give those as rewards.
Next to my drool, you can choose. You can bottle the drool or bottle the tears.
All right, so this week we are on part 1 of the letter N for necrophilia.
Hot. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not.
Kelly's definitely not rubbing her nipples right now.
Yes.
You guys, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get murdered at some point in this podcast.
By my nipples?
They're so sharp. So, necrophilia, in case you didn't know, is sexual gratification from having sex with a dead person or attraction to a corpse.
Or fucking dead holes. That's just,
Yeah. Yeah, this episode's going to be gross. Just fair warning. I don't want to get too crazy into detail.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be excessive with the listing of things that happened.
Aw.
Just because I don't want all of the audio to be me dry heaving the whole time.
Would you say to put the snacks down for this episode?
Yeah, maybe you would want to not listen to this during lunchtime or at the dinner table.
We're jerking off.
I mean, definitely while jerking
Oh,
off.
okay. Yeah.
So I tried to keep it somewhat tame. I don't want to go too extreme, but that's the subject that we're talking about. If that's going to be bothersome to you, if that's going to be too gross or too much, I totally get it. This may not be the episode for you.
Go back to N.
Yeah.
No, wait, M. Go back to
How
O.
does the alphabet work?
I'm going backwards. Go back to A and hit play.
So the word necrophilia comes from the Greek word nekros, meaning corpse, and philia, meaning love. But I feel like they need another one for like just fucking when you don't love them hoes. Necrophilia. So to start it off, now that you know what it means, there are definitely some examples throughout history and in science even, not just in the true crime world. So I looked up some of those. I'm not super knowledgeable about these things, but I'm gonna throw it out there.
Cool.
Just fair warning. In the animal kingdom.
Wrong.
I should have had you do this part because you're the resident science nerd.
Tell
you know
me.
a lot about whales and sharks.
Sharks. That's it.
In the animal kingdom, there are a lot of animals that actually practice necrophilia. I found a few, but I'm sure there's more examples like mallard ducks, penguins, lizards, and some frogs as well.
Penguins?
Yes.
My world is shattered. That's awful.
Oh no. Yeah, it's not like the rule is that they commonly do necrophilia, but it isn't outside the norm, basically.
Oh, okay.
If there is
when they're drunk.
You just got to get in where you fit in or something. It's the penguin way. Yeah, it's just the exception of just if there is a mating partner that happens to be deceased and they stumble upon it, they will still try and procreate with it, basically. There are examples in the animal kingdom where this occurs. It's not a uniquely human experience, basically. That's kind of the point, I guess.
When you die, I'm in a necrophilia body. God damn it, I hate myself.
Everybody should have seen what Kelly just did right now. I got to take some video of that. All the times that you sexually harassed me. It's my favorite pastime.
Yeah.
In addition to the examples within the animal kingdom, there's also representations of necrophilia throughout history. You can see examples of necrophilia in ancient art. So in, the Greeks or Egyptians, there's depictions of people having sex with skeletons. In Greek mythology, there's a few examples of this. There's Achilles, who had sex with a dead body of an Amazonian queen. I can't pronounce her name. Penthesilea. I'm going with it.
That sounds good, yeah.
After he had killed her in battle. There's also Dimotes, Dimoetes. I should have looked that up, but I didn't. Deal with it. Who fell in love with the corpse of the most beautiful woman he had ever seen.
I hope I stay hot when I'm dead.
And you're not super smelly, Kelly?
Yeah.
Beyond the Greek mythology, there's also cases in ancient Egypt. From my understanding, they would have to deter embalmers from having sex with the queens or anybody that they were trying to bury. It was a very common thing for anybody doing the embalming to try and sleep with the women, basically.
Yeah, I'd fuck a queen. Royalty, why not?
Right? There's just plenty of examples throughout history where this has happened.
People are weird.
Yeah. Yes, this is true.
A hole is a hole is a hole. So, ugh.
Some of the common causes behind necrophilia are low self-esteem resulting from significant loss or abandonment. In male necrophiles, there's often a fear of being rejected or a desire for a partner that isn't capable of rejecting them. So a very willing, submissive partner to the point of basically unconsciousness or death.
Yeah, just get one of those fucking inflatable dolls.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things. There's plenty of things out there for you.
Pocket pussy. Something.
Another cause would be overcoming a fear of death or a fear of the dead. So being so terrified by it and having so much anxiety that you conquer that fear by getting closer to it.
Like really close.
Like all up in it.
Like got all up in that dead.
And lastly, another cause would be early exposure to a corpse. So if you were really young and happened to see a dead body, sometimes you start having fantasies, apparently, that connect the dead body to your sexuality.
The last two make sense. The first one is just fucked up. It's because they don't want to be rejected. Like, get over it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's a common thing for men. There's that saying, I feel like I may have said it before on here, but women's biggest fear is that men will kill them, and men's biggest fear is that women will laugh at them. Mm-hmm. I think that rings true for a lot of people, more so than maybe they want to admit.
Yeah.
I think for men, there is a very deep-seated fear of ridicule and rejection,
Yeah. I'll take a no over robbing a grave.
Right?
Opening it up, smelling it, deciding if I still want to do it, and then going through with it. I'll take a couple no's.
Yeah. I'm okay with that.
I'll be a wingman or something. Whatever. I'll buy something that'll fuck me. Jesus.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you. But for these necrophiles, they don't feel that way. That is their thing. They need someone that's completely submissive, or they're just simply only attracted to that. In 1987, there was a paper released by Jonathan Rossman and Philip Resnick called Sexual Attraction to Corpses, a Psychiatric Review of Necrophilia. This study examined 122 cases and put necrophiles into 3 categories.
It's too many cases.
I know. It's, I don't know. Of course it's uncommon, but I think it's more common than we know, though.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
Yeah.
Fuck.
The first category is necrophilic homicide, which is someone who can't achieve sexual gratification without a dead or unresponsive partner. This person is what we think of when we think of necrophiles, especially for doing like this episode, because these are the people that are actually killing someone for the purpose of having sex with them.
What's Dahmer?
That would be necrophilic homicide.
Okay.
Yeah. The next one, category 2, would be a regular necrophiliac.
Just a regular
I feel like they could have come up with a better name for that. But this person is kind of a opportunistic necrophiliac. So if they stumble upon a dead body or they happen to work in the industry of death, then they may have sex with the corpse. And the third category is necrophilic fantasy, which accounts for 68% of necrophiliacs, which are people who actually seek out professions where they're closer to dead bodies. So they enjoy everything kind of around death, everything morbid, all that stuff, and want to be closer to it. And the extension of that is involving their sexuality.
So like the medical examiners and people that work at the morgue and funeral homes.
Yes. Ugh. I'm scared to die because I feel like just statistically how many people that work in the death industry are trying to fuck the corpse.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't want to get fucked after I die.
But I have so much anxiety. I just feel like that's my anxiety and I'm being a scared old lady or something.
No, we have big titties.
Of course we're afraid.
Yeah.
Like everybody wants those. I'm now legitimately scared of this after doing these research.
Yeah.
So, some statistics on necrophiliacs. 92% are male.
Of course. Oh my God.
I mean, I don't know. Anatomically, that makes sense.
Because, do dicks stay hard when you're dead? I know there are after death boners. This is the thing that I didn't
look up. I think I just didn't want to spend that much time looking at dead dicks. It's definitely not something I want to research. Ugh. But I would think that it would be a lot more difficult, you know?
Yeah. I mean, maybe there's a lot more pegging cases we don't know. Like, you know, it's gonna be like
possibly.
Maybe that'll make a comeback
like
or something.
Once her husband dies, she finally gets in that ass.
Let me get that booty hole before the EMT show up.
That's my new favorite song. Another high percentage of necrophiles are actually people whose long-term partner dies. I know. It's really sad. But there's actually a lot of cases of necrophilia where someone's wife dies, and that accounts for 21% of necrophiles. It's a huge percentage. So there's a few cases of that are pretty famous. There's Carl Tanzler. Have you heard about the doctor who fell in love with one of his patients and she passed away and he kept her for a long time?
No.
Yeah. And there was actually a case just last week. I wrote their names down. Russell and Wendy Davidson in the UK. This just happened where she passed away and he kept his wife for like a week and just kind of stayed with her even though she had passed away.
That's some type of like grieving, right?
Yes,
or some type of like, some type of
attachment to this long-term relationship. It's more of a romantic necrophile.
Is it bad that I'm more okay with that?
Oh no, there's part of me that's totally just like, oh.
Well, because they had that pussy before or that dick. You know what I mean? It's not.
There was
rapey.
Previous consent. Yeah.
She probably wouldn't mind. She probably
she's
maybe
like,
I
miss you too.
Yeah.
No, but there is part of me that's just like, okay, that's for me. I'm just like, okay, that would be too gross for me. Mm-hmm. But I have a little bit more compassion and understanding for that, you know? 15% of necrophiles are simply straight up attracted to corpses. 12% of necrophiles have a power control motivation similar to a rapist. 64% of necrophiles had a prior history of violence and sadistic acts. The average age for necrophiles is 34. For some reason, I feel like that's a little low. I picture a creepy middle to older age man.
Yeah.
Is that terrible of me?
No, I picture the same thing
Okay.
too, but
Yeah, 34 seems a bit young, but okay. The average sexual orientation for necrophiles was also within the normal range of the general population. So 69% heterosexual, 13% bisexual, and 9% homosexual. So very comparable to the average.
you know, everyone thought it was all the gay people having sex
I
with
know.
corpses. You know it.
Everyone blames it.
Yeah.
Like all people think pedophiles are gay.
Yep.
Not true.
Yep.
They're straight dudes.
They're like, blame-
That's just
When in doubt, blame the gays. That's
always.
most
We're not
people's-
trying to do that. We
No.
are just trying to marry each other and have babies like y'all.
exactly
Leave us
Exactly.
alone.
ridiculous.
For mental health issues, 17% of necrophiles were found to be psychotic, and 50% of necrophiles had personality disorders in general. And then this is the part that gets creepy for me and I don't want to think about. 57% of necrophiles are in a profession giving them access to dead bodies, like hospitals, morgues, funeral homes.
That's
I'm clenching every muscle in my vagina right now. Like,
don't die.
stay out. Oh my God.
We should get chastity belts that
Yes.
like, snap like a fucking bear
We're going to
trap.
get those like teeth ones. Exactly. You're going to lose a dick if you try. I dare you.
And then like, how do you get one for your mouth? Every hole, belly buttons too. We're getting
Nothing's safe.
Yeah.
Can't get in my ears. Another study done in 2009 by Anil Agrawal was published in the Journal of Forensic and Legal Medicine, which created a new DSM necrophilia classification system. This one from 2009 actually broke it down into 10 different types of necrophiles compared to the 3 before. The first one is role players, so people that are aroused by just the fantasy or pretending. These people often seek out interactions with dominatrixes or sex workers or whatever.
I
to
thought you
fulfill
meant they
this.
dressed up the dead people like cheerleaders.
No.
Like role playing. That's doing a lot.
This is a
Like a
schoolgirl.
schoolgirl.
This is my nurse. No. Yeah, these people can sometimes satisfy that urge because of the type of necrophile that they are. They can get whatever they need in that gratification from actually a live person,
Oh,
just
okay.
pretending, you
Cool.
know? The second one is what we talked about before, the romantic necrophile, or the people that are grieving or bereaved and they're actually reacting to the loss of a partner. The third one is necrophiliac fantasizers who just think about it and have the fantasy, but they don't act it out. They never seek out to make it reality.
I'm okay with all these so far.
But you know, it's 10 of them, so
It's
they're
gotta
going to
take
get
a
worse.
turn, yeah.
The next one is tactile necrophiliacs who are aroused by touching a corpse without actually having sex with it. There's a case that I'm considering doing in one of the next episodes where there's a couple that has sex on top of corpses. So this would be classified as tactile necrophiliac. So they want to be close to the dead. They are aroused by the death and the corpse itself, but not necessarily the act of interacting with it sexually.
Oh my God.
I'm
That's-
sorry.
No, it's okay. That's just
It's a lot. The fifth category is the fetishistic necrophiliac who removes objects, souvenirs, or whatnot from a corpse without having intercourse. I
So
hate
they-
the word intercourse.
wait. They just steal. Yeah, I hate that word. But they just steal stuff from them and then keep it and like jerk
Yes.
off on their stuff later.
You know, I don't know specifically about their jerk habits.
I like
but
these
yes,
shoes.
just the idea of having a piece of that dead body is enough for them. So they are taking parts.
Wait, do they take a piece of the body or something
it
they're wearing?
depends. Something
okay.
they're wearing, a piece of them, some sort of souvenir that reminds them of their interaction with that.
I got your nose.
The sixth category from this study is called necromutilomaniacs.
Is that an Incubus song?
Yes, definitely a Brandon Boyd lyric. You can see that emo hair everywhere. These necrophiles get pleasure from mutilating a corpse while masturbating without having sex. So they interact with a dead body and they get gratification from that, but they don't have sex with it.
Okay, so it's like
Cool.
jerking and then like a titty grab.
Yes.
Yeah. So you would
This-
say first base.
Oh man, I feel queasy. The seventh category is called opportunistic necrophiliacs. And these necrophiles would not normally interact with a dead body or seek it out, but when they have the opportunity, they will take it. The eighth category, again, is the regular necrophiliacs, which prefer dead sexual partners, but they're not homicidal. So their preference is to be with someone that's dead, but not so much of a preference that they're willing to kill for it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or not so much of an arousal that they kill.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one, number 9, is homicidal necrophiliacs who want to commit murder for the express purpose of having sex with a dead person.
Gross.
Yeah. And the last one is exclusive necrophiliacs. And these are the necrophiles that only can have sex with the dead. That is their
sounds
entire
fancy.
sexual preference.
Ugh.
Fancy?
You're like exclusive. VIP.
Luxurious.
Champagne room. Necrophiles.
The last thing that I wanted to look up before getting to a story, because I just thought it would be interesting, was the state laws on necrophilia.
No. Bet you they're kind of shifty.
You know, in my research, I had also come across people discussing how the laws don't really change unless someone brings it up. So who's that person that's a random legislator or whoever that's going to file a motion to get this law put in place out of nowhere, you know? It has to usually be a case that's under dispute where they don't have a law in place that makes the law come into place,
Yeah.
you know? It's just too weird of a thing to bring up out of nowhere. An example of this was in 2006 in Wisconsin. There were 3 boys that went to a cemetery and attempted to dig up a body in order to have sex with it. And the police knew this because when the boys were apprehended and taken in, they had condoms with them.
That's how they knew?
So, yes, so they didn't actually get the body or anything like that. There wasn't evidence in that way, but they knew their intentions.
Yeah.
And because of that, as recently as 2006, there were laws put in place in Wisconsin regarding necrophilia. So this is a common example of how the laws for this crime are put in place.
Yeah.
Nobody really changes anything until someone tries to, you know, dig up a body.
I'm glad they were going to wear a condom. Though. Swear to God.
There's
like,
something about that that's just like, all right, at least you're smart.
it's not skin to rotting flesh.
Yeah, I
completely.
mean, you guys are awful, but still.
Yeah.
There are multiple states where necrophilia is technically still legal because there's no laws regarding it. No cases have come up.
It's like gray area.
Yes. In Louisiana, North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky, New Mexico, Nebraska, and Vermont, you can fuck a dead person, and there are no laws about it.
Huh.
Yeah, just in case you want to take a vacation and that's a factor for you. But Louisiana and North Carolina, sodomy, just simple, non-forcible anal sex, is illegal, but necrophilia is not.
Wow.
And in Kansas and Kentucky, any same-sex oral sex is illegal, but necrophilia is legal.
I can blow
What
a
the
dead
fuck?
person,
Right?
but I
can't blow Kelly.
What?
Yes. So,
America.
So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting to look that up because there are quite a few. That's too many states
way
to
too
not have
many.
legislation about it. But also, it doesn't come up unless it comes up.
Yeah.
You know, there's part of me that understands the cause behind that, but part of me that's completely baffled. It's crazy. So that's pretty much it that I have about general info for necrophilia. So now we get to look at a necrophiliac.
Sweet.
Tonight we are going to discuss John Reginald Christie, who was also called the Rillington Place Strangler. John Reginald Halliday Christie, too many names.
Halliday?
Yeah.
Halliday
Halliday. Was born in Yorkshire, England in 1898. He was actually born on my birthday. He was born on April 8th.
Oh, shit.
Twinsies. He was the 6th of 7 children, and he was the only boy in the family. John Christie's father was a stern and abusive presence in the household, often making his children take long military marches and even whipping or flogging them. Usually he did this with no reason or no warning, just out of nowhere. John's mother was overprotective and emasculating. But masculinity is overrated anyway, so I'm on her side on this one.
Wait, but where the fuck was she when he was doing marches with the kids? Where'd she?
I know.
Huh.
It's weird. I don't know. It's kind of the codependency of abuse, I think, where people just kind of step to the side and
Maybe
let
it was
the
her
other
idea.
parent. Well, yeah, I don't know. While his father withdrew and rejected his son's frailty, John's mother spoiled him and considered John her favorite. John's sisters were dominating and undermined his confidence. As a child, John began to exhibit symptoms of hypochondria and OCD, often displaying an extreme need for cleanliness and exaggerating his health issues to get attention. He definitely would fake sick a lot. Like even into his adulthood, he could call out from work and not show up to places and just say that he wasn't feeling well, like a lot.
Yeah, nobody does that anymore.
Definitely not me. As a child, John was active in his church and a member of the choir. At school, he enjoyed playing sports and also joined the Boy Scouts. All of the extracurricular activities he did provided him a social life, but never made him any friends. John had trouble getting close to other kids, and when he did begin a friendship, it rarely lasted very long. When John was 8, his grandfather passed away. His grandfather was a stern and cold man who the kids were very scared of. When John's parents gave him the option of seeing his grandfather's body at the wake, John decided that he wanted to see him. When John saw his previously frightening grandfather, he suddenly felt relieved by the lack of tension. After this point, John became fascinated with death and corpses. He began to play in the graveyard and gravitated towards a specific vault that contained children's coffins. He liked to look inside the cracks in the hopes that he could catch a glimpse of the dead. Apparently near their house, there was a cemetery, and it was kind of like John treated the cemetery like his little park, like a playground or something, and he would just kind of run around after school.
I mean, that's all cool until he starts fucking them.
Right. That's fine, and just keep
You're
your
just a
dick away.
creepy little kid. Like,
Yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, I mean, that's one of the causes that we discussed earlier, is just this
Seeing.
early exposure to death that maybe he kind of felt what he would express as a relief or even like a pleasure at seeing his grandfather like that, because he was just no longer afraid
Yeah, he was
of
scared
his
him.
grandfather plus death.
Mhm.
He was just okay with it. John won a scholarship to Halifax Secondary School when he was 11. He excelled in math and particularly in algebra. It was later found that John had an IQ of 128, which would put him in the top 5th percentile in the UK, which is probably like the top 0.5 in the US, because we are definitely struggling to keep up. Although he excelled academically, he struggled socially. In his teens, he went to a lover's lane with a girl that they called Monkey Run. What the
Isn't that
fuck
a
is
movie?
Monkey Run?
Isn't that movie with like
Really?
Brendan Fraser? Or no, it's Monkey Bone.
Oh.
Sorry.
So he went to a lover's lane with this girl and they attempted to have sex, but he couldn't perform. Apparently, he was impotent and he discovered this in his teens. Or I should say, this girl, random poor girl, discovered it. He should just twist it to a point. God damn.
Yeah. Just
Think about the cemetery or something.
get your finger
Dead
game
body,
up.
dead body.
Yeah, something. Compensate.
Right? After this incident, the girl told some friends, and eventually word got around the entire school. Kids began teasing him and calling him names like Can't Do It Christie and Reggie No Dick.
Reggie No Dick.
I don't know. I feel like they could come up with some better names, but that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm
Pretty good.
entertained. I like
Christy Softcock.
it. You'd have been a great bully.
Johnny Limp Junk. I never got the opportunity to bully when I was little, so I'm totally going to come up with names for this guy. Let's see. John Christie would later say, "All my life, I've had this fear of appearing ridiculous as a lover." This shameful experience furthered John's dislike for women, which had already been started by his issues dealing with the presence of strong females in his family. Apparently, some of the issues that he had with women, and we covered this kind of with matricide, was that he had an attraction to his sisters. Like he could recall later on in life seeing them get dressed when he was younger or seeing them in certain ways and actually wanting to have sex with them, but also knowing it was wrong and also hating them so much for being like strong forces in his life.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't like strong women, period, but he also wanted to fuck them.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of began to emerge in his teens. It was from this Lover's Lane event forward that psychologists believe John displayed the extreme hatred of women and a fearful dread for normal sexual interaction. In his adulthood, he would only be able to perform sexually if he was in complete control with an extremely passive and submissive partner, often one that was incapable of rejection, like a sex worker, an unconscious woman, or a dead woman. In his teens, he began to utilize the services of sex workers as a means to get sexual gratification without the fear of performance anxiety or rejection.
Yeah, because they're getting paid anyways. They don't give a shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that he was able to let his guard down with sex workers because he was just like, well, they're getting money and that's it. And that was one of the ways that he was able to have that control and lose that anxiety and that fear.
God, sex workers fix so many problems.
They
it's
do.
Crazy.
We love you guys.
Yeah. And I love you too. I'm just kidding. But I'll love you more for $50.
Despite John's academic prowess, he dropped out of school at 15 and joined the army during World War I. While serving, he was involved in a mustard gas attack, which he claimed blinded him temporarily and rendered him mute for over 3 years. This is part of the hypochondria thing because he was able to see at some points. People could tell that he could see and talk. But he still was very insistent that he was not able to.
They're waving their hands in front of him like crazy.
They would just throw something at his face and
Yeah.
be like, yeah, you caught it.
Try and throw a punch and then see if he flinches.
Right?
You know? Knew you were faking.
Some people believe that his muteness and blindness was simply a way to get attention. The muteness did not prevent him from dating, and soon he met a young woman named Ethel Simpson Waddington. The pair began dating and married in 1920. John still had sexual difficulties, which his wife ridiculed him for, and he regularly visited sex workers throughout his marriage. If your dude has impotency problems, maybe making fun of him is not the best way to help. That's
No.
not going to help the situation.
It's your problem too, right?
I mean,
would
that's
feel
like
very
the loving
unattractive.
way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd feel shitty, but I wouldn't be a dick about it.
No, again, just if someone's got a better head game or finger game,
Right?
it counts so much more. If
You
it's
can finger
good,
blast your way to like a healthy sexual life, you know?
compromise, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, something.
I don't get it. Yeah, but apparently she ridiculed him pretty hard. Like it would come up later on in their marriage too. Soon after they got married, John became a postman. While working as a postman, he was caught stealing postal orders and spent 3 months in prison.
That's a perfect job for a mute person, huh?
Yeah, just walk around.
Like, I never talk to my fucking mailman.
No.
He always has his head. Like,
you just wave. That's it.
No, this kid is always jamming out to his
Oh.
own music. I'll say what's up. He doesn't, like,
It's like,
never.
fuck you.
Never look. Yeah, long
I'm
hair
listening
in front
to
of
Cannibal
his
Corpse.
face. Pretty much, yeah. Like, he must be a mute.
Right?
I honestly thought he was deaf for a while because I didn't hear his
Maybe
music.
he just doesn't like you.
That's a lie because I wear slutty shit all the time going down those stairs. And I even purposely open my legs more to see if he looks up. And it never works. That one always works.
That one always gets him. The old Lindsay Lohan.
Just started putting nudes in our mailbox and stuff.
Like,
so
oh, how did that get there? When he got out of prison and came home, he began to have issues with his family. One day during a fight with his father, the previously mute John Christie suddenly began yelling. Just as quickly as his voice came back, he realized that his muteness act was at risk and he immediately went mute again.
What?
Yeah. No take backsies on that.
Yeah.
Either you is or you ain't. Come on.
That's amazing.
After another 6 months of silence, he was miraculously cured of his muteness for good.
Miraculously.
Right? When he was 25, he was put on probation from his job at the post office for accusations of violence, but it is not known what specific events led to this probation. Rumors about his visits to sex workers also began circulating amongst his neighbors and coworkers. His marriage and family relationships were strained, so he decided to leave his wife and move to London. Ethel remained in Sheffield and supported herself getting a job as a typist. From what I heard, John had claimed that his wife was cheating on him.
Mm-hmm.
But there's really no evidence to back that up. I think that was just an excuse and he kind of wanted to, quote unquote, like live the single life again,
Mm-hmm.
or basically play the field of sex workers,
Yeah.
and just be alone.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't seem like Ethel was the kind of person that would be cheating on him. And also it seemed like she really, really loved him. Even though there were a lot of problems, I think that she really wanted to be with him ultimately. But I don't know, this accusation, it just didn't seem like it was true.
I don't think women named Ethel cheat.
I think that's a good general rule.
Ethel
Hey, is your name
Waddington.
Ethel?
Yeah. That's not a cheating name.
By 29, John was back in prison on theft charges, and he spent 9 months incarcerated. Upon release, he moved in with a woman he met while soliciting sex, but their relationship was tumultuous as well. Their domestic disputes escalated, and eventually he was put in jail for another 6 months for assaulting her with a cricket bat. He was also suspected of other assaults on women, but no formal charges were ever made. He was released, and soon after, he was convicted of stealing a car from a priest and spent another 3 months in jail. I'm wondering if he knew the car belonged to a priest when he stole it. Like, I'm going to get this dude's car. Like, or if he just didn't know and then found out later and
Yeah.
what that was like.
He had a sticker on his car that said, Jesus is my homeboy.
Exactly. In total, he was convicted of 6 crimes over 10 years in London. In 1938, John reconciled with his wife Ethel and moved into a new home in Rillington Place in the neighborhood of Notting Hill. From what I understand, Notting Hill was, at the time, not anymore, but was kind of a low-income neighborhood, one of the poorer areas in London. And so they moved into this place specifically because the rent was really low.
Mm-hmm.
And the house itself was kind of a lot of shared quarters. They had 1 bathroom, but there was 3 different families living there, or 4 different families or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
sharing this one space. And they had a community garden and shared washroom in the back, the whole thing. Anyway, just for a info about what the place was like. It was
Cool.
very drab and small.
Yeah.
Very
Low
close
income.
quarters. Yeah. The visits to sex workers continued as an outlet to relieve his violent sexual urges, but either his wife didn't care or he was skilled at hiding it. Soon after moving to Rillington Place, John was hit by a car and was hospitalized. This accident fueled John's hypochondria, and he would visit doctors 173 times over the course of the next 15 years. During World War II, John became a volunteer member of the War Reserve Police. Due to the desperate need for reserve cops, there was no background investigation, and John became an officer at Harrow Road Police Station. So even though he had a criminal record, because the need was so great, because all the soldiers were at war, he just got in like nothing. I wish they would have done a background check, you know?
Yeah,
Fuck.
absolutely. And this is where the access to dead bodies, I mean, cops kind of have access to dead bodies at some point, right?
Yeah, but really it's more the abuse of power
Yeah.
in John Christie's case.
And being in control.
Yes.
Mhm.
And just kind of being able to track women and like for people to trust him. Like, yeah.
Being able to stop any sex worker that you want.
Yeah.
You know, just control.
This job lasted for 4 years, during which he thoroughly enjoyed the power and authority the position afforded him. He took himself very seriously, and he earned a reputation for being a strict enforcer. He used his newfound authority to assert his importance and keep tabs on everyone in the neighborhood. John would follow women, take diligent notes on residents' behavior, and even became somewhat of a peeping Tom in his efforts to keep tabs on people. To watch his neighbors, John created a peephole in his kitchen door to keep a watchful eye on his neighborhood. John was known to chase down every lead and treat every crime seriously, no matter how petty.
Sounds like a good cop.
So petty. John kept this position for 4 years. One of the ways that the Christies' marriage was able to survive the second time around was due to Ethel's frequent trips to stay with her family. John still paid for sex, but also began having affairs with women he would meet at local bars. He began seeing a woman who worked with him at the police station whose husband was in the war overseas. While Ethel was away, John was over at his mistress's house when her husband suddenly surprised her by returning home.
It's like an episode of Cheaters.
Right? Upon discovering John in his house, the husband beat him up, then filed for divorce. From then on, John decided to only invite women to his house. Also, suddenly his dick works, or
Yeah.
what? Like, out of nowhere?
How about just don't fuck married women? I like how he's like, no, you guys come to my
Right?
house. What the fuck?
Because that was clearly the part that was the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the marriage. In 1943, John met a woman at a bar named Ruth First, who was a 21-year-old Austrian munitions factory worker. The two hit it off and began an affair. One day while they were in bed at John's house, he received a telegram informing him that his wife Ethel would be returning home soon with her brother. Upon hearing this news, he went back to bed and strangled his girlfriend while having sex with her. He would later say, "I remember as I gazed down at the still form of my first victim, experiencing a strange, peaceful thrill." Afterwards, he buried her in the community garden that they shared with the other tenants at their Rillington Place building. This was also a really small garden. I don't know why that makes a difference to me, but it was only apparently 14 feet by 16 feet. That's so fucking small.
Is it? That sounds huge in LA. Like, I don't know. I'm like, we don't have any.
I guess you're right. But I don't know. When you think of a yard, like, I don't know. That sounds small to me. There's actually a map I found of where he hid his bodies.
Mhm.
And it's all such a small space.
It's a communal space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
So, I don't know. I may put up that map because I found it really interesting and weird. After 4 years, his temporary position with the War Reserve Police ended. So John got a job with a radio firm called Ultra Radio Works. He soon met a 32-year-old woman named Muriel Eady, who worked in the assembly department. They met in the company cafeteria and hit it off right away, so they began eating lunch together every day. John even invited Muriel over for tea with Ethel, and she befriended his wife as well. The Christies even went on a double date with Muriel and her boyfriend. When Ethel started planning her next visit to her family, John decided that Muriel would be his next victim. This time, John had learned from his previous kill and decided he would like his victim to be unconscious when he attacks them. He planned to administer carbon monoxide to make his victim unconscious. John figured that the best way to justify this was to tell the women that he was able to use home remedies to cure various ailments. John would offer assistance to women with chronic health issues, unplanned pregnancies, and even the common cold or flu. Once they accepted his offer for help, he would administer carbon monoxide to put them under. In October 1944, Ethel went out of town again, and John began attempting to lure in his next victim. He told his work friend Muriel that because of his first aid background from being in the War Reserve, he had a remedy for her throat and sinus issues. She agreed to come over on October 8, 1944, and John explained that he had a medicine she could take through an inhaler. He administered carbon monoxide through tubes until she passed out. When she lost consciousness, he strangled her and raped her. When he finished, he buried her in the communal garden with his previous victim.
How shitty were the doctors at this time? We're like, oh, I'll just go to this guy.
Right,
He
yeah.
said he can cure me. He's got to be hot, too. You know, how many girls has he gotten so far? Like, or
He's not.
really? For
Yeah,
being
no.
a mute? I mean, or on and off mute.
He can talk again now. He took all that carbon monoxide.
He doesn't
Cured
always
himself.
talk, but when he does.
Strong silent type. Yeah, I don't know. Apparently, some accounts of this also implicate Ethel as being involved in helping him administer first aid. I don't know. It's just hard to pin down exactly what happened.
Yeah.
We don't know if possibly he was helping other women and legitimately helped them.
Yeah.
And if Ethel was involved and was helping him out as some sort of nurse's aide or some sort of, assistant. Or if it was just every time he invited a woman over, he killed her. But it just seems like there's some accounts that he had invited other women and actually helped them.
Mm-hmm.
And that Ethel was involved or knowledgeable to some degree.
Yeah, because there's no Yelp, like we're saying, so it has to be word of mouth.
Right.
Like people be like, yeah,
People
he
would
totally
know.
helped me with this.
But also he would approach people. Like he would seek people out, like his coworker and like, various sex workers that he would meet or someone at a bar. And he would just tell them, oh, you're not feeling well, or, oh, hey, you're pregnant. I can help you with that.
Salesman. I don't like that.
Yeah, he would definitely solicit people.
Mm.
Yeah. In 1948, Timothy Evans and his wife, Burl, I really don't know how to say this.
They're awful names that sound like vomit coming out of your mouth anyway, so you can't fuck it up. Burl. Merle.
Yeah.
Ethel.
They are. They're all pretty
They
bad.
sound like
Ruth.
They sound like donkey
Waddington.
names. Yeah, Waddington. All.
They're all pretty bad.
Yeah.
So Tim and his wife Burl moved to Rillington Place next to the Christies.
Burl. That's
I
so
know.
stupid.
It's weird.
Ah.
Beryl. What the fuck kind of
Burl.
name is that? But I've heard it pronounced Burl.
Sounds like a chemical or like a gem.
Right?
Yeah.
The couple was young and had financial struggles, which only became worse when their daughter Geraldine was born later that year. Tim had an IQ of 70 and had trouble holding a job. When work was unsteady and money issues became dire, the couple would have terrible fights. Tim at one point lost his job and told Burl that he would go find work on the road and start traveling and looking for things to do.
Mm-hmm.
So Burl decided to invite a roommate in to help pay the rent, and this girl, Lucy, came to stay with them. Once she came to stay with them and she was sleeping in the bed with Burl because it's such a small place again, Tim decided suddenly that he wasn't going to go look for work. He just stayed home and was unemployed and basically lived off of the new rent money, pretty much, it sounded like.
I was thinking he just wanted to stay because it's 2 chicks in
Right.
one bed.
He's like, oh, yeah.
wait, I'll come back. Just kidding.
So he stuck around, and he even would sleep on the floor next to them or go stay at the Christie's house sometimes. And then eventually, I guess he began an affair with Lucy and then moved out and moved in with Lucy and then eventually came crawling back.
Wow.
So their marriage was kind of all over the place. He was very unpredictable. From what I understand, he had grown up in poverty and Burl had more of a middle class background and she was always on him to like be consistent, keep a steady job, and he never could and was always kind of running around, drinking too much, meeting women, all that kind of stuff. So they fought a lot, but financial stuff was a big part of it. And then they had this young daughter to support and it just became harder.
He should just, every time he gets a drink, just give out a hand job and boom, got a job.
More money.
Yep.
Hand job's still a job.
Yep.
Tim Evans would often come over to the Christie's apartment when the arguing got so bad that he had to leave the house. When their baby Geraldine became a toddler, Burl found out that she was pregnant again. Apparently they were arguing a lot, but they could still make some babies.
I hate couples that do that shit. Like, they're like, we hate each other, and they're always breaking up, yet
Right.
somehow, I have
There's
a
a baby.
couple friends like that.
I know.
Like, you weren't mad enough to not stick your dick in her, so...
Plus his pullout game weak.
Yeah. Think about that. Every time you're coming in someone, that's another job you got to get. I mean, you got to make that much more money.
Now you got to work at night. I hope you're happy, bro. The couple was extremely stressed about bringing a new child into their family when they already had so much trouble making ends meet.
Think about that before you fuck.
Right? But I don't know. I mean, I think that there was a little bit more common then because contraception and birth control just, it wasn't available and we have more opportunities to protect ourselves now.
Yeah.
So I there's part of me that's just like, okay, you should be more careful. But then the other part of me that's like, yeah, but this was a common problem. Nobody had that. We have that now. Of course, we can say that now, but
That's true.
back then. The fighting increased and the whole neighborhood was aware of their relationship issues. John offered to help the couple and claimed he had knowledge of how to perform abortions, which were illegal in the UK at the time. Tim declined John's offer, and the couple is rumored to have tried various home remedies. On November 8th, 1948, Tim left the house, and John approached Burl again to offer his help in terminating her pregnancy. Burl apparently agreed, so John gave her carbon monoxide, strangled her, and violated her. When Tim returned home, Burl's dead body was in bed and bleeding from every orifice. When I read that at first, I was like, everyone? But then hearing accounts later and the autopsy, apparently she was bleeding everywhere.
Wow.
So I feel bad going into such detail, but there was blood coming from her nose, her mouth, her ears, and from her genitals. So everywhere was bleeding. Yeah. John convinced Tim that Burl had died of poisoning resulting from various other abortion remedies that she had tried up until that point. He basically had told Tim that she was septic, that she had septic poisoning, and died from that, and completely took himself out of the whole scenario. Like he had just found her that way, basically.
Stumbled upon her, yeah.
He also convinced him that if they went to the police, the officers would immediately suspect Tim's involvement because of the couple's history of domestic violence. John also claimed that even if police believed Tim didn't purposely kill her, he would still get in trouble for his prior knowledge of the abortion remedies that led to her death. Tim agreed to keep quiet, so the pair began the task of covering up the crime. The body was put in a shed behind their housing complex, and John instructed Tim to go stay with his family in Wales. John said that he had found a couple to take the baby Geraldine and told Tim to inform his family that the couple was separating. Tim Evans' mother was troubled by this explanation and kept asking Tim about the mysterious disappearance of Burl and the baby. On November 30th, Tim cracked under the pressure and went to the police station in Wales to confess. You're just shaking your head.
He's like,
I know how much you love confessions. This one is particularly bad because, to be honest, his IQ is so low that he's really susceptible to coercion. And the detectives really take advantage of that.
I'm glad he cracked, though. I mean, shit. They would have never found out, right?
Right.
I mean,
it
shit.
would have just gone unnoticed. Not that it really did any good, though.
I mean, he didn't do the crime. I hate confessions when it's like people that did the crime just flip in a real quick second. Like, he had nothing to do with it. He just stumbled upon it and didn't want to get in trouble for trying to get an abortion before. So he was just pressured into doing it.
Yeah.
I would kind of get weirded out if, like, my friend is really good at hiding bodies and figuring out. Like, he's
You're like, you're too good at this.
This is your first time, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if you brought him to the garden to put the body away. Like, wait, there's like 4 other people here.
He told the officers that he had accidentally killed Burrell himself by giving her abortion pills and then disposed of the body in a sewer drain. Detectives briefly investigated his story and found nothing. Tim was interrogated more intensely a second time, at which point he changed his story and implicated John Christie in Burrell's death. On December 2nd, 1949, a thorough search of Rillington Place revealed the bodies of Burrell and baby Geraldine, hidden in a wash house in the back garden. Baby Geraldine still had a men's tie wrapped around her neck, which had been used to strangle her to death. An autopsy revealed no evidence that Burrell had taken anything to try and abort her 3-month-old fetus, but there was bruising inside her vagina. So really nothing backed up the story of the abortion remedies having anything to do with it.
Yeah, why would there be a tie around baby Geraldine's neck? Why would her vagina be all bruised and she's bleeding? I mean, the bleeding, you could pills
But there's
and all
still, the police are only looking at Tim. You have to remember
sucks.
that. I know. They think that, it's the financial pressure of having another baby and that he had to do something to get rid of it. There's also the history of domestic violence. Yeah. Everything is pointing to him.
It makes sense. You would, rationally,
and
you would think
always
it was him.
Flip-flopping. That's suspicious to them. Like, it's just so many things pointed against him.
That sucks.
Yeah. Further questioning caused Tim to change his story numerous times. Again, he had an IQ of only 70, and the detectives were aggressive in their interrogations. Tim would give 4 different accounts of what had happened that night, even once claiming that he had strangled her himself. None of his confessions accurately identified where the bodies were discovered, but police dismissed this inaccuracy without investigating the possibility that another person had hid the bodies. So at no point could Tim identify that the bodies were in the wash house. It was clearly only John Christie that knew that the bodies were there.
Mm-hmm.
In a couple versions of his story, Tim did claim that John was involved, but John was extremely convincing and charismatic when the police questioned him. John called Tim's accusations ridiculous and told detectives how Tim was a known liar and abusive husband. John also coached his wife, Ethel, to corroborate his information in her questioning. Tim Evans' trial began on January 11th, 1950, and his ineffective defense team failed to follow up on a number of inconsistencies in the evidence and testimonies. John Christie was a key witness for the prosecution, and his positive impression on the jury was instrumental in proving Tim's guilt.
No fucking way, dude.
Yes.
Oh,
yes way.
My God.
John Christie's demeanor on the stand impressed people. He gave pleasant and detailed testimony that painted himself as both a hero and a victim. John also made sure the jury knew of his war service and the physical ailments he currently suffered. He spoke softly and deliberately. He considered each of his answers and tried to be as detailed and specific as possible. The jury perceived John as a virtuous, concerned neighbor who was always doing his best to be helpful. John Christie's testimony was in sharp contrast to Tim Evans, who appeared guilt-ridden, unreliable, and confused during his testimony. Tim claimed to be innocent, but most people believe that he was trying to save himself by throwing blame on John Christie. Since Evans was already a known liar and he conducted himself poorly in the witness box, he was less than convincing to the jury and general public. The defense team brought up John Christie's previous criminal record. I'm going to list it again just because. 1921, postal order theft. 1923, obtain money through false pretenses and violence. 1924, 2 counts of larceny. 1929 was the assault with a cricket bat. And in 1933, he stole a car from a priest. But the prosecutor would paint John as a reformed man and point out that all these crimes had happened about 17 years prior. And he also pointed at Tim, saying that you have these domestic violence charges that are very recent.
Oh, that's a good prosecutor. Oh, man. Damn it.
Yeah.
That
and he also
sucks.
pointed out how, Tim's violence was focused towards his wife, and maybe John's was more like having a troubled youth or something like that.
17 years earlier, yeah, you would think he's reformed.
Right. So he painted him in a very different light, and it worked. The jury believed him. Yeah.
No. Damn, reputation is everything.
Right?
Like, don't get into trouble, or at least do it when you're under 18.
So after only a 2-day trial and 40 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict for Tim Evans.
I kind of want to puke a little bit.
I know. It's devastating. It gets worse. Tim continued to proclaim his innocence and attempted one appeal, but ultimately he was hanged on March 9th, 1950. After the trial, John Christie's hypochondria got worse, and he would visit his doctor 33 times in 8 months for stress-related symptoms. Girl, he needs some Xannies. We got you. John became depressed and lost about 30 pounds in a very short period of time. He lost his job and found it difficult to maintain employment over the next few years. He found a position as a clerk with the British Road Services, and his health seemed to improve. But soon after getting this job, he suddenly put in his notice without warning. He claimed that he had found a better job, but the truth was he didn't have another job lined up, and he was once again unemployed. His wife Ethel was furious with him, and the couple began having arguments again. Ethel began taunting John about his impotence, which embarrassed and infuriated him. John had hoped she would visit her relatives as she used to. Instead, Ethel spent more time at home, which deeply annoyed her husband. John wanted to have other women over, but he was unable to do so with Ethel at home. 5 days after John Christie quit his job, Ethel went to watch television with a friend. The next day, she took Wash to a laundromat, and people recall she looked well and cheerful. She said nothing to anyone about problems at home or going to visit relatives again. The following day, December 12, 1952, Ethel Christie disappeared mysteriously. John would later claim that he woke up one night to hear Ethel lying next to him, struggling to breathe. He tried to clear her airways, but had no success. He noticed an empty bottle of phenobarbital nearby and realized that she had taken pills to kill herself. He said that he couldn't bear to watch her struggle and decided to strangle her to end her suffering. He had then buried her body under the floorboards in the parlor. That was his account, just to point that out. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if the autopsy report supported that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm going to say no.
Right? I don't know.
Probably strangled her.
He would go on later to blame his victims for every single crime, to say, this person attacked me, this person was sick, this person was trying to kill themselves. This was a common theme. So I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
But that's what he said happened. Either way, he killed her and she was put under the house, under the floorboards. Neighbors complained about the strong odor coming from their home, so John began cleaning the house with strong disinfectants.
Oh, that doesn't make it better.
I know. I also read that he had blamed it on some new neighbors that moved in. He said that their cooking smelled.
I don't even want to know. It's racist. I know they're super racist.
Honestly, I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, it was some sort of, I don't remember what their ethnicity was, but he was just like, yeah, their cooking is weird. And it was some non-white
That's
family.
such a white thing to say.
Yes,
I swear to God.
right?
Oh, man.
John told neighbors that Ethel had gone back to stay with her relatives, and he told her relatives that she was too sick to communicate with them. To maintain this lie, John continued to send gifts to her family, claiming that they were from Ethel. With Ethel out of the picture, John was free to lure in more victims. He met a pregnant sex worker named Rita Nelson and offered to help her terminate her pregnancy. On January 19th, 1953, he administered carbon monoxide to Rita, then strangled and raped her. The next morning, he had breakfast and tea with Rita's body, sitting at the table with him. Afterwards, he hid the body in an alcove behind one of the cupboards in his kitchen.
And tea. Did you like put a glass up to your
Ruined tea
mouth?
time.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Like, here's a sip. Ugh, I hate this guy.
In February 1953, another sex worker named Kathleen Maloney was gassed, strangled, and raped before being put in the alcove with Rita Nelson's body. His last victim, Hectorina McLennan, was also killed in the same manner and put in the same alcove. So there were 3 women in one little cabinet in the kitchen. After this, John wallpapered over the alcove, but the smell of decomposing bodies was overwhelming. In January, Christie sold all of his furniture, then sold his wife's wedding band and watch. Having sold his bed, John slept on an old mattress on the floor. His only household possessions left were 3 chairs and a kitchen table. Unemployed and broke, John decided to forge his wife's signature and empty her bank account. John would stay in the unfurnished house until March and stopped responding to letters from Ethel's concerned family members. One day, John encountered a woman named Mrs. Riley who was looking for a place to rent. John invited her to look at his place and set up an appointment for her to come over. When the appointment time arrived, John was shocked that Mrs. Riley had brought her husband. The couple liked the place and decided to rent it. I really think that he had thought to attack her, but once she brought her husband, he couldn't do so he had to keep going with it. And then he was just kind of like, well, I guess I'll make some money off of this.
Yeah.
And was like, I don't have anything here. I guess I'll move out,
How did they not smell anything?
I know.
don't get that. 3 bodies.
Yeah.
1 body and the neighbors were complaining. That's
Right?
fucking insane. Or they really wanted to get a deal on the
Right?
spot.
They're like, well, price is right.
Yeah.
Just put some Lysol everywhere.
Lysol doesn't kill
Febreze
it.
the shit out of this motherfucker.
So sad.
Some hippie incense. Get
Oh,
that Nag
patchouli.
Champa.
Oh, God.
Don't worry, we'll just sage it.
We're going to cleanse this house.
The couple liked the place and decided to rent it. The Rileys paid 3 months' rent in advance, and John Christie moved out of Rillington Place on March 20th, 1953. When John Christie's real landlord discovered this, he informed the couple that John was not authorized to rent out the property, and it actually belonged to him. The Rileys were forced to leave, and the landlord began preparing the property for new tenants. While renovating the flat, the landlord looked at the wallpapered alcove behind the kitchen cupboard and became suspicious. Upon closer investigation, he could see that there was a hole in the wallpapering, and through the hole, he could see a woman's body.
And smell dying
Right?
flesh and see
You had
flies
to see
and
it
maggots.
to know that that's what the fuck was going on.
Oh, there's a little hole. Let me just... something's up. Like, fuck
One
you,
of
dude.
the things that was interesting about this alcove, though, was that it was very cold. So when they actually
Oh.
did discover the bodies, they were pretty much in really good condition
So
and
they're not-
mummified. They were very cold.
They're not decomposing. They're not
Yes.
smelling weird. And,
They smelled,
but
like,
not as much.
not as bad as if it was hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Still.
Yeah, still, seriously.
I smell a fart when someone walks by, okay? I'm sure I could smell a dead person and know. Like, you have to know that.
That's awful.
Yeah.
I know. Police were called and the 3 women's bodies were retrieved from the alcove. Since there were 3 bodies in the cupboard and the previous Evans family murders, detectives conducted a thorough search of the entire property. Ethel's body was found under the floorboards, and the 2 bodies in the garden were discovered as well. I was also reading that one of the characteristics of necrophiliacs is keeping the bodies close, whereas other murderers may want to dispose of them in the woods or take them further away, or even some that will dismember the bodies and try and get rid of them. The necrophiles will actually keep a full body intact and bury it close to them or keep it where it's accessible, which makes sense that the floorboards, he can take the bodies back out.
Yeah, he
if
wants
he
to
really
fuck 'em.
needs, or like, yeah.
He needs
in the
access to them.
Yeah.
That's-
So that may have been part of the reasoning behind putting them in there in that cold alcove and all that. It has more to do with his necrophilia. John Christie was apprehended 10 days later on March 31st, 1953. John gave confessions about 4 of the murders, but had explanations justifying them all. John claimed that Ethel's death had been a mercy killing and that 3 sex workers had been aggressive and taken advantage of him, driving him to defend himself.
All 3 of them took advantage
Right?
of him. Oh, my God.
Yeah, clearly it was just excuse after excuse and never taking responsibility, always justification. Yeah. His confessions were full of excuses and fabrications. When the bodies in the garden were found, he confessed to those too, and at one point he even admitted his involvement in Burl Evans' death, but he claimed it was a mercy killing as well. That one I think he claimed was similar to Ethel's, where he kind of found her in a terrible situation and decided to kind of compassionately end her life or something. He was trying to put himself in that kind of like Kevorkian position.
It doesn't
like
get you
a
off
dick.
free,
Right?
right? That doesn't make it okay. You can't have
None of it is okay. All of it
No.
is so awful.
2 mercy killings and 3 defenses. Like,
Yeah.
what? No.
Forensic evidence suggests that he had sex with the bodies of the women he murdered, but John vehemently denied this.
It was a mercy fuck.
Right? John's trial for the murder of his wife began on June 22nd, 1953. His defense team decided to enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial lasted only 4 days, and the jury found John Christie guilty after only an hour and 20 minutes of deliberation. Christie was sentenced to death and scheduled to be hanged approximately 2 weeks later. On July 15, 1953, while preparing to be hanged, Christie complained about having an itch on his nose, and the executioner reportedly told him, "It won't bother you for long."
Yes.
I know that has nothing to do with the story, but
That's
that
good.
made me laugh.
Thank God. Yeah, like, fuck you, buddy. Don't worry about that itch.
John Christie was executed at Pentonville Prison in London, which was the same facility that executed Tim Evans. Following John Christie's trial, an investigation into Tim Evans' guilt was opened. After only 11 days, the investigation concluded that Tim was indeed guilty.
What?
2 years later, an attempt was made to launch another investigation with extensive evidence produced to suggest that the first investigation had been rushed and skewed to support the findings in the trial. It was suggested that detectives had coerced Tim's confession, and the initial investigation had neglected to look at the evidence that didn't support the guilty verdict. The investigation launched in 1965 implicated Tim as playing a role in his wife's murder, but granting him a posthumous pardon for the murder of his daughter John Christie never confessed to killing baby Geraldine, despite having admitted to all of the other murders in the weeks leading up to his execution.
Even after the guy's dead, they're like, we don't know. I mean...
Well, here's the other thing. In the UK at this time, from what I understand, you were put on trial for one murder at a time. So Tim was put on trial for the murder of the child, but not his wife.
Okay.
They gave him the pardon for the crime that he was actually convicted of.
Yeah,
but that doesn't help because he's already dead.
Fucking dead. Who cares?
Yes,
oh
I know.
My God. Unless there's
I know.
some money that goes to his mom or whoever.
Something.
This
But
is
I mean,
bullshit.
At least it does make me happy that there was one investigation and they closed it. But then, you know, some people were like, hell motherfucking no.
Yeah.
You open that shit up again and we
Seriously.
investigate this shit for real. Because the initial one, they only looked at evidence that supported the guilty verdict. They were only looking like, okay, here's
that makes
more
sense.
stuff to like support it. But then because people pushed, which I'm glad that they did, it just shouldn't have been let go.
Yeah.
You would think that if you're a detective, you would look at the fact that John Christie was right there the whole time, that he was a part of the trial, that Tim had brought it up before, and then all of a sudden it's found out that he's a serial killer with this exact same MO.
Yeah.
He's a strangulation murderer, a necrophile. Like, these are all things that are attributed to John Christie. So it really shouldn't have taken much investigating to be like, oh shit, we put this on the wrong dude.
And pregnant
but they
women.
didn't want, I know,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, this
They
was specifically his MO. But they didn't want to look at anything that didn't support the guilty verdict.
That's
So eventually it came around, and it doesn't make a difference to bring him back to life, but it's so sad.
I can't believe that. There's no justice. Oh.
It's terrifying.
Do you want to go home and cry?
I know. We can have a good long hug. Or I could read you some 5-star iTunes reviews. That'll cheer you up.
I love those. Happy tears. Hooray.
All right. So this week we have a few 5-star reviews.
Oh, hooray. Happy tears. Happy tears. Happy tears.
So we're going to do some iTunes reviews, but before that, I just want to say thank you one more time to our Patreon supporters, Leah, Amanda, and Lee from this week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you again so much. And then we have a few iTunes reviews.
Woohoo.
The first review we have this week is from another podcast called Nerds with Words. They're awesome.
Cute.
Yeah, they're really great. They have a great podcast. And they said that this is a wonderful podcast for true crime lovers everywhere. Keeps you interested with humor sprinkled in. Thanks, you guys. We appreciate that. Check out Nerds with Words. We love them.
Those were good words. I love them.
We like those words, guys. The next one is from Mike, who says that he likes the conversation and humor thrown in. And he said that we rock.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you.
You rock.
The next one is from someone that calls themselves Go See Something 83.
Oh, yeah, I'll go see something.
We see some things. Who said that they like it so far and it's a great idea to use the alphabet as a guide. Thank you to Go See Something.
Thank you, Go See Some. That's all Brianna. She's the brains.
The next one is from Liz, who said that she's enjoying the podcast and that we have great chemistry. Aww.
Aww,
Thank you. Kelly's inappropriately touching me. I like it. The next one is from Ambeck. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. Who called me the voice of reason and you crazy Kelly.
I've never heard that or say that all the time. I think I call you my voice of reason. Pretty sure. So
she
that's
said
awesome.
that she's never laughed at murder the way she does with us.
That's
Thank
so
you
cool.
so much. That's very sweet.
Yeah,
we
thank
appreciate
you.
you. The last one is from someone called Craziest Podcaster. I don't know what podcast they do, but that name is awesome.
I like you. You're crazy.
You're our kind of people.
Mhm.
And they had said that they enjoyed the podcast. They love the idea and our sense of humor. Thank you so
Aw,
much.
Thanks.
Thank you to your crazy ass.
Yeah,
we
thank
appreciate
you.
So thanks everybody for leaving iTunes reviews this week. That was really awesome. We appreciate you so much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, from the bottom of our hearts.
Our
like,
cold black little hearts. Thank you so much. And
Come
thank you
covered
again.
hearts. Thanks for Patreon and reviews.
Exactly. Thank you so much. We just appreciate it so very much. I can't even find the right words to say how grateful I am. I just feel like I repeat myself over and over and I sound stupid, but I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I don't want to sound cliche and say it's a dream come true, but
you know,
it's pretty fucking cool.
So thank you so much, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
And let's see, if you haven't rated or reviewed, please go ahead and go to iTunes and do that. We really appreciate it. If you haven't followed us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we would really appreciate that as well. If you need any victims resources, suicide hotlines, CPS, anything of that nature, again, those links will be in the description. And our research for this week's episode will be in there as well if you want to follow up with some of the articles too.
Ooh, I want to see the map.
Yeah,
the garden.
map. So thanks you guys for checking out another episode, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.